Hey, thank you for joining me if you're here. I'm Yesenia, and today I wanted to talk all about how far I've come in my author journey since 2013, and everywhere I've been so far along the way, what happened, how I got there, and just show how far I've come and some of the big lessons I've learned along the way. And I really want to share some of the takeaways with you, because back when I started, I wish that someone had shared some of this stuff with me. And so yeah, I'm excited to be here today and tell you all about my author journey, how far I've come from selling maybe a book a month. Let me tell you, like, I would go into KDP, like I wouldn't even go in there except maybe once a month, because I knew odds were, I would just see a big fat goose egg and zero sales. And then sometimes I would see a book sale, a single book sale. And that was me for about 18 months, was maybe a book sale a month. And it was like that for a long time until I made some changes and I learned some new things. And most importantly, I implemented some things that I was learning all about self-publishing and marketing, but it took me a long time to get there. And so today I want to share those things that I learned with you. And yeah, so if you're new here, welcome. I'm Yesenia from WriterMom.net. And WriterMom is a place for writers who want to live a fulfilling life while building a successful business. So it's for writers who don't just want to work all the time and burn out and shove everything else aside for writing and publishing, but you want the best of both worlds. So like me as a writer, I'm a mom, and I called my blog Writer Mom because those are the two most important things to me right now, is my author business and me as a mom, as a parent, as a wife. So that's how WriterMom.net was born, and it had some other names before that, but I finally settled on Writer Mom, and yeah, just making this a place for other writers who are like me, and who want to like have a happy life, have a healthy life, but also build a successful business doing what you love. So if that's you, thank you for being here, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Say hi, and chime in with any thoughts as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Okay, so I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning, before I was even, I guess, a real writer. Let me mute this. So for years, when, ever since I was a teenager, even when I was a kid, like I really liked stories. And I didn't always like to read either. I started to like reading in third grade when my third grade teacher, she kind of got me hooked on reading with this specific book that I found on her shelf, and it was called No Flying in the House. And it was just like a cool book, and that's how I got into reading, and I became a lifelong reader after that, thanks to her. Before that, like, I didn't even care about books. So I owe her a lot. And then, so I remember, like, maybe in elementary school, like, I started writing, like, a little chapter book about, like, aliens coming into my room and stealing my homework, that kind of thing. And I remember it was several pages long. And then, I still like to read, but I didn't really do anything with writing after that until I was in high school. And I was still reading a lot. I got into Harry Potter. I got into my other favorite books called Animorphs. It's a really long series. And I just really loved to read. And then I loved it so much that I wanted to be able to tell my own stories. Like, I was really inspired to write my own stories, but I didn't really know how or how to get started. So what I would do was I would just like hop on the computer and like search for just hours on end, how to be a writer, how to write a story. And what I would do a lot, since I was into like Harry Potter and Animorphs and like these other kind of stories with big worlds in them, is I would research a lot on how to build worlds and like fantasy stories and stuff like that. And so that's what I did for a long time, but I never actually wrote any words. And I'm sure, maybe that was the same for you for a long time. Maybe you just talked about wanting to write a book and write your own stories, but you never actually did. And so that was me for a long time, all throughout high school pretty much. Probably, well, maybe not all of high school, but like at least the first half of high school was just me like wanting to be a writer, but I never actually was a writer. I never actually wrote anything. I just kind of would gather all this research on how to do it, but I never actually did it. And then, so I kind of forgot about it again until I was a junior in college, and then I started, I don't know exactly how, I think it was because I found out about NaNoWriMo somehow, and I signed up a couple of times, but I would sign up and then not do anything, so, and never wrote a single word still. And then I think that's when I started to get into writing again and like really wanting to write a story, and actually started to jot down some ideas and like world build. And I still have a notebook somewhere of like this big binder full of like notes for like a world and the language and the culture and like this fantasy world that I had created in my mind, but I still never wrote a word. Like I just couldn't gather the courage to even write a word. So this was me for years. Like I couldn't even sit down and write anything at all because it just seemed too scary. But then, like, I guess I started to find out about self-publishing, and this was through Joe Conrad's blog and then Lindsay Broker's blog. So I've been following her since like 2012, 2013, and I still do. She's like one of my favorite people to follow online. Hey, Lindsay. So yeah, once I started finding out that like I could actually write a story and self-publish it myself, I think that's when it became a lot less scary. It was still really scary to even write a book, but just knowing that I could actually share it with people and publish it on my own rather than submitting it to agents and then like trying to find a publisher, and it could take years and it could like realistically like never get published. Like it was just a game changer for me, and so that's when I really started to take it seriously in college. I actually got pregnant as well, and I moved in with my then boyfriend slash fiance, and we started building a life together while I was still finishing up school, and I was gonna have a baby. And it just kind of hit me how this was like such a huge dream of mine, but I had never really done anything about it. And it's like it hit me that my life was going to change in just a few months. And I was pretty pregnant by then. I was 6 or 7 months. And I had done all this research on self-publishing, and I kind of knew what to do, but I knew I had to write a book. And so I decided that it was going to be now or never with this whole writing thing. Either I was going to take it seriously now and do something with it and put in the time and work for it, or I was just going to let it go because my life was going to change and I wasn't going to have like the time or energy for it. I still had to finish college, but I just couldn't give it up. It was too much of a passion. I just knew that even though my life was going to be crazy trying to do this too, along with becoming a parent, like I just knew I had to do it. And so NaNoWriMo 2011. It was 2011, and the original blog post of when I did NaNoWriMo for the first time are on my blog, writermom.net. If you go all the way back or search NaNoWriMo, I'm sure you'll see all the original blog posts of when I wrote this story for the first time, my first novel ever, a bunch of gibberish pretty much. Like it will never see the light of day. It's not even the same genre I write anymore. But I became a writer because I finished my first book. Like I actually sat down every single day in November and I wrote. And I wrote 50,000 words, and I remember being like this big at Thanksgiving and like at the dining table, like working on my story, typing away, and I hit the finish line, and that story was complete CRAP, but I had done it. I had actually written a full book, and that's when I knew I could do it. And that's when I kind of started to take my own author career into my own hands, these dreams of being an author and selling books and telling stories, and like I just knew it was like my true passion. And so that's what I started doing, even with like college still going on. I still had a year left, and then I still had a new baby. I found the time to work on my dream because it was important, and I realized it was important. And so what I wrote after that, after NaNoWriMo, I decided to switch gears and write a story that, you know, I could do something with, not just this like very quickly typed, you know, just a bunch of gibberish thing I did in NaNoWriMo. Like, okay, I was gonna sit down and think about this and actually maybe plot something and like think about, like, come up with a real story that, you know, I could hit publish on. Because that other story, no. And so I ended up going to what I knew. And so like my teenage years were still fresh on my mind. And so what I ended up, and I always loved YA fiction. So what I ended up writing was a YA contemporary romance, because I always loved romance too, romance movies and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote my first real book, like a book that I would not be completely ashamed if someone read it. And then I worked on that for a few months, and that was 2012, I want to say. And I sent it off, like I worked on it myself, I edited it as best as I could. I was still like a really new writer. I didn't really know what I was doing as far as like telling a story, but I did it. I felt good about it, and you know, I was ready to hit publish on it. And so I found an editor online, and I started working with her, and I sent it off to get proofread by her. But then, and you know, in my mind, I'm thinking this is like the best story ever, you know, well, maybe not the best, but it wasn't complete CRAP in my mind. Well, I was surprised to get an email back from her a couple days later saying, you know, this story still needs a lot of work before I can actually proofread it. Like, this is going to need a developmental edit, and it needs work on this and this. And it was just like this big story level stuff. And, you know, kind of crushed me a little bit, and crushed my wallet a little bit, but I bit the bullet and I did it. I invested in a developmental edit, and I worked with her, and we really took the story up a few more notches. And so that really delayed the release of it for a few more months, and I hated that because I already wanted to become like this official author. But you know, I waited, and I finally hit publish New Year's Eve 2013. And so by January 1st, 2014, I was officially published. Let me see here. Let me check my notes, because there's a lot going on now, and I don't want to miss anything. And so what I realized was that I had made a big mistake. So I hit publish on the book, but it didn't really sell. It sold like maybe 5 or 6 copies to some online friends that I knew, and that was it. Then it was like crickets for like just months. And what I realized was that I had gotten the cover completely wrong. The title was just bad. The cover was bad. Like, the cover was, I guess, good, but it was completely wrong for the YA contemporary romance genre. This was like an overall pretty clean book. You know, just high school teenagers falling in love, that kind of thing. Nothing like too sexy or steamy or anything like that. But the cover I had gotten was just not the right fit for it, and I found that out the hard way. And it was kind of my fault, because my friend, who was a cover designer, we traded services, and she kind of told me, and I just didn't listen. And so that was kind of my fault, but it barely sold. And then if it did sell, like, it just got a lot of returns, and I just felt horrible, because it's like, okay, what's wrong with my story? Like, it almost felt a little bit personal, you know. And so it sat like this for a year while I got the next book out. And I did the same thing again. You know, I didn't realize it, but again, wrong cover. It was way too sexy. It looked like a dark, like, new adult romance, sexy, steamy kind of story, and it just was not. And so the reviews that were coming in, you know, barely any reviews, but they weren't that great. And like, these readers were downloading this book expecting something else, and they just weren't getting it. And so it just wasn't working. And I have the original covers right here, and I want to show you. Let me see. So this is the first book. Okay, and this one's not, I mean, this one wasn't that bad, I guess, but the title was just not that great. It was called Unbreakable Love, and it was just like way too cheesy of a title. I'm horrible. I'm still horrible at creating titles, and so sometimes, like, one of my writer friends named Kendra helps me with that, because I suck at it. And so this cover wasn't bad, but it could have been better. Where I really made a mistake was with the second one, and again, the title was really bad. Unending Love. Ugh, cheesy, right? And so I still really love these covers, but they're just not right for the story. Like I was the one who picked out these images because the characters are Latino, and it's really hard to find Latino people in stock photos, and so I thought it was great, but just not the right fit. And so that was a big reason why the books just didn't take off at all. And it took me a while to even realize that, maybe a year and a half. And then once I did, I didn't do anything about it. I was afraid to do anything about it. I thought, what if I make changes or try to fix it and these books still don't sell? I mean, this is my dream. It's my passion. I was selling maybe a book a month. A lot of months it was still just 0 sales whatsoever, even with 2 books out, and it was devastating. And it felt horrible, but I was just like in denial about the whole thing. Like I just almost didn't want to deal with it. It was like the whole like being afraid of success thing about it. But by the time I got to the next book in the series, like I think I was starting to gather some courage and wanting the books to succeed and wanting to do something about it. And I decided it was just time to stop being in denial and do something about the series. Like I couldn't just let this go on forever. I didn't want to just sell a book a month forever. Something had to change, and it was in my hands to do it. And so what I did was I studied the top charts on Amazon for YA contemporary romance. I looked at the covers, I looked at the blurbs, the titles, everything. And I knew my series had to match what was selling. Because I was pretty sure the stories were, but I don't think the whole package was. And then I looked at my own stories too. I realized I had made a huge mistake with this book, with the old book 1. It was a romance, but my big mistake, you know what it was? It didn't have a happily ever after. Huge mistake if you're writing romance. Don't do that. Don't make the same mistake I did. It didn't have a happily ever after. The girl meets guy, they fall in love, things get messed up as they often do, and then they don't end up together. So it was just bad, and I didn't realize it. It took me that book to learn, romances are supposed to have a happily ever after where the guy and the girl end up together. And they didn't in that story. They did in the next story she ended up with a different, much better guy, but not in that first book. And so I knew, like that was another reason the reviews weren't great. These romance readers wanted a happily ever after, and I didn't give it to them. And so that was another reason I think that they weren't selling. And so what I did was I took that book, I took this book, and I made it the prequel. And I took the next book, and this was the new book 1, because this is the one where she meets another guy and they do get the happily ever after. And so that's what I did. In the prequel, I actually ended up using it as a reader magnet too, and so that really helped later on when I tell you a little bit more about what I did too. Let me see. So again, the book 1 became a prequel. The old book 1 became the prequel. The old book 2 became book 1 because that was the one with a happily ever after. And then by then I had the next book just about ready to go. And then so what I decided to do as well was I changed everything. So I changed the titles, I changed the book descriptions, I changed the covers, finally realizing my mistake. And it took my whole summer of 2015 for me to do it. I was a teacher at the time, and so I had the summer off, and that was my entire summer, was just like relaunching and redoing this whole series. And so that by the time summer was just about over, I would have 3 books in like a newly branded series. And let me tell you how it did. Let's see. So by August 2015, these 2 books came out again. New covers, new titles, new book descriptions. I even revised this book and kind of fixed the beginning because the beginning was kind of boring. And that was another like big lesson, storytelling lesson that I've learned, is like your beginning really has to hook readers from the beginning. Otherwise, I mean, when they check out the the sample chapters they're not going to buy, or they're just not going to finish the book at all. So yeah, another huge lesson. Hook your readers from the beginning. Make sure your first chapters are like the best. Okay, so I relaunched the first 2 books in 2015, and I published the next book, which was now book 2, because there was a prequel, book 1, now book 2, in September across all platforms. So I had put them in KU before, again, saw nothing. So I decided to just put them wide and see how they did. Now that they were rebranded, I immediately saw traction on iBooks and Amazon. 1 month, like I even sold more on iBooks, which is crazy. And what was really crazy was that before I had been making maybe a couple of dollars a month, and now I was seeing like $300 and more a month. And since then, since I did all of this, I've made anywhere from like $500 up to like even $1,000 a month from my books. And I've published more since then too. And you know, I wasn't a bestseller. I wasn't immediately this huge instant bestseller once I relaunched the series, but I was finally selling books, and it finally, like I saw that, okay, this really is possible. I made a few mistakes, but I fixed it, and I am on my way to reaching my dreams of making a living off of this. And so that was really exciting. It was really cool to see reviews coming in. Seeing those download numbers was just wow. I made the first book perma-free. That really helped get it some visibility. I booked some newsletters so that more readers could see it. And, you know, it just, all of this stuff that I did really, really helped. And like, it's ever since then, you know, late summer of 2015 that I've really started selling books since then. So I became an author in, you know, New Year's Day 2014. For 18 months, I sold maybe a book a month, and it wasn't until 2015, August and September, when I relaunched all of this, that I even started really selling books. And even now, you know, I'm still not a bestseller or anything, but I'm still hanging in there. I'm still consistently putting out books. I now have 2 series. I've 3 books in a new series that's done, and then now I'm putting out the last book in this series. And so there's 1 more novella in that series, and then that's going to be wrapped up. And so ever since then, like, I've been working really hard at this, keeping up with what's working, implementing what I've been learning, because for 18 months I didn't do that. I was following Joanna Penn and SPP and like learning so much, consuming everything I could, but I wasn't doing anything with it. And so like that's another big takeaway for you guys, is like spend some time learning from other authors what's working, but also make sure you're implementing it. It's no use in learning it if you're not using that knowledge to help you sell more books, write better books. And that's the mistake I made for 18 months, is that I didn't do that. You know, I needed the courage to do that. Once I relaunched the series, I also set up my first mailing list. Like, I knew for about a year that I should have one, and I didn't do it. But once I did, you know, I really started getting better results too. You know, with selling books, seeing more sell-through, hearing from readers, getting more reviews. And so here are some of the big takeaways from you from all of this. I know it's kind of gone on longer, but I'm going to be wrapping up. So number 1, don't be afraid to recognize your mistakes and level up. You know, everyone's going to make mistakes in this business, especially starting out. Pretty much everybody starts at the bottom. Most of us are not going to be an exception to that. I wasn't. I was at the very, very bottom for 18 months. It's okay, you know, just learn. As soon as you recognize a mistake, try to fix it. Learn as much as you can. Always try to be better. And then another one is to believe in yourself. For the longest time, like, I mean, that's why I was stuck at the bottom for 18 months selling a book a month, if that. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe I could succeed. And I was afraid to succeed. I just thought, you know, what if I'm not good enough? What if I try to make these books better, but it's still not good enough? And that was hard to do that, but I did it. And like this story that I heard recently from Pat Flynn, I don't know if you've heard of him. He does smartpassiveincome.com, and he's like one of the people that I love to follow. I love his podcast. and he has this book called Letting Go that he just relaunched, and the old cover had a like an elephant in chains on it, and I never got it, and I never even picked up the book, to be honest. I had picked up his other book that was more like business related, and I never really got the whole elephant thing until he explained it the other day when he relaunched this book, and it was just like, it just hit me like, wow. And so I want to share it with you today because it's relevant. And he was talking about how when elephants are trained, you know, when they start out as babies and they start to be trained, they put these chains on them. You know, elephants are pretty big and they're pretty strong, but, you know, when they're babies, they can't rip these chains, they can't get out of these chains, and they try and they try and they try and they just can't. And so eventually they gave up, and so they know that they're chained, and they grow up, and when they become like full adult elephants, they could easily rip off those chains, but they don't. Why? Because they've been trained that they just can't, so they give up. They don't even try. They don't try to break away from those chains or to get free. And so, like, I think some of us are stuck in that mindset sometimes of, oh, I see these other authors that are like selling tons of books and they're living the dream and they're where I wish I could be, but I can't do that. I know I still think like that sometimes. It's really hard for me to like really actually believe that I can do it and that I can make real money from this, being an author, doing what I love, running my own business. Like, I make some money now, but it's not near anywhere where I want to be or like at a full-time income yet, and so it's hard. And so you just have to remember not to be like that elephant. You know, you have to, no matter where you're at, you can do it if you just believe in yourself and you try and you learn and you know, you just have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that you can succeed, and you just have to say it to yourself all the time, even if you don't always believe it right away. I think if you just tell yourself and you're aware and you try to change your beliefs, eventually they will. And that's a huge part of actually succeeding, is believing you can, so that then you'll do the work. And so, again, implementing everything that you've learned, starting an email list, relaunching your series if you need to, upgrading your covers if you know that they weren't great, or if you never got your book edited and you think, you know, if you're not selling books right now, you probably have a good idea why, or maybe some writer friends who can be honest and tell you why. And so that's kind of scary, but you should do it because it's going to move you closer to your dreams. And always try to be a little bit better than you were yesterday. Again, these are all things that I've learned, and these are the takeaways that I have for you. It's scary. I've been there, believe me. But again, you just have to sit down and think about like what's holding you back, what's holding your books back, what's holding your author business back, and you have to be better. You have to strive to be a little bit better every day than you were the day before. I know I have a long way to go, but we all just have to go after our goals and dreams, you know? I'm not going to be completely happy and fulfilled until I do, so I'm just working every day to get there. This is what I love. It doesn't even feel like work to me. And so this is what I'm going after, and I'm going to do it. And, you know, I have to believe that I'm going to get there sooner rather than later if I just keep putting in this work. And so I want the same for you. I want you to believe in yourself. I want you to go after what you want, go after your dreams of becoming a full-time author, you know, whatever it is that you write. And like I said, sometimes it's scary because sometimes I feel like, what if I never get past like this like $500 to $1,000 range? And sometimes it's less than that if I don't market. It's really scary to think about that. But you just have to shake that fear off and push it away, and you have to keep going. You have to keep writing, keep publishing. And again, this is a reminder for me as it is for you. Just keep going and you can do it. And so that's the message that I want to leave with you today. You know, sometimes I think about how far I've come. You know, when I wasn't even writing anything, that was too scary. Just the thought of writing a book was too scary. And then I did write a book and I knew I could do it. But then, you know, when I published, I mean, that wasn't scary for me. I was impatient to hit publish, so I hit publish, but then when it was crickets, that was scary. You know, getting 0 book sales, that was scary, and then knowing that, you know, it was all in my hands, and whether I sold books or not, and that was in my hands, that was scary. But always think about how far you've already come and keep going. So yeah, that's what I had to share today. I felt like I had to just get that off my chest. I still have a long way to go. I bet you do too, but I know we can do it. So yeah, just think about that whenever you sit down to write and it feels overwhelming, or it feels, you know, you feel disheartening when you look at your book sales. Just keep going. You can do it. Everybody starts at the bottom. So yeah. Thank you for being here. Definitely chime in the comments. I'd love it if you did, or if you shared this video. And I will see you next week, Thursday at 2 p.m. on Facebook. And yeah, have a great week. I will see you then. Bye.